question I was going to that I wanted you to kind of build off of a little bit earlier was about and I think you called it in your presentation, one of the silly rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the previous silly rules, and you were talking about bringing that patient who's clearly red, and we have this obligatory mindset that we have to set them down on the tarp for some reason before putting them in the ambulance. But there's also that obligatory, the first ambulance that shows up is supposed to stay there and not be used. So speak to a little bit.
When we were researching this, we were really looking at what we called some of the silly rules that yes, I understand why they're there. Kind of like, does the red patient go to the red tarp first? I understand why we do that, but it doesn't make much sense if you're thinking about it, that the minutes count on this patient.
If there's an ambulance waiting.
If there's an ambulance waiting and it's not committed to anything else. And one of those that's been pretty standard in EMT and paramedic textbooks is, that the first ambulance doesn't transport on an MCI. And I'd been in plenty of drills over the last several years because anytime I found out anyone was doing a drill, I asked if I could come just to take pictures and watch and ask questions, so that I could report back to our crew and say this is what I saw there and everything. But one of those stands out in my mind where they had a lot of victims coming out of the church, and they're all in the tarps, and all the ambulances are gone because they're really physically moving them to the other end of the property and then waiting for the time that it would take for them to get back in service to get another patient. And they had that first ambulance laying there, and they got reds and yellows on the tarp. And I walked over. I knew the answer, but I asked them the question, like, why don't you just put a couple reds in the ambulance and go? Oh, we can't do that. That's the first ambulance on the scene. I'm like, okay, but it does have wheels, right? It's still got, it's better than a police car,
motor,
right? We could probably, but the cot's not there. Okay, I know it's not the best choice, but still maybe if it's my daughter, I'd rather you just lay her on the floor, put a couple of them on the floor, and
exactly, stack them up.
And take them. I call it a silly rule just because it's something that we always learned, and they all looked at me like, you idiot, it's the first ambulance, it can't go. And I got why that's there. The first ambulance is your place. It's your beacon. It's your supply house. It's a place to get somebody warm. I totally get all that. And some departments say that first ambulance never transports because that's for us, which is okay if that's your policy. I know one of the departments that we teach at, that's theirs. That first ambulance is for the police officers and the firefighters on those, and that's fine if that's your policy. But I feel like it's better than a school bus, right? Because you would put them on a school bus, but you have an ambulance there. So
the strict adherence to a particular paradigm, right? Like start triage or assaults, or what are your thoughts on that?
So, as Ray had talked about earlier, the RPM, respirations, pulse, and mental status are huge, and they work really good on a lot of calls. And that whole start triage that we learned, and a lot of the tags are designed around the start triage because some really smart people came up with it. It was way better than anything we had, and we used it. We found out that actually there are some problems with start and RPM. Specifically two. First one is going to be an active shooter, like we talked about with the green walking. Yeah, but he's got a gunshot wound. Well, he's a green. He answered.
Walking, right.
Yeah.
I keep asking him questions. He can still answer them, so I guess he's still a green. Well, he's not going to be for long. So it doesn't work well on penetrating injury. The other thing is that if you go back to that video in the school bus, they're not putting on tourniquets. They are not doing needle decompression. They are not sealing a chest wound. But that's what we teach now. So START flies right in the face of TECC and Rescue Task Force. And START was 80s, and this is 2020s. I'm thinking probably we need to build that into START. And I know START's been changing to try to accommodate some of this stuff. So I'm not saying they aren't, but at the time we were working on this, START it was not the best. And I was surprised in the 5-county area of university hospitals that all of the counties had a mass casualty plan, and 3 of the 5 counties, it said START will be ours. In other words, it actually said it in the county plan, you will use START. And we looked at that as a silly rule just because, look, the goal is to triage.
Yep.
Who's my worst? Okay. You got 20 elementary kids who are perfectly fine and healthy at gym, and you tell them stand against the wall and you want to put them in the order of shortest to tallest, it's going to take a little time to go, okay, now, no, you over here. Oh, no, I'm sorry, you got over here, to get them in that line. That's what we're really trying to do, is figuring out who's the worst ones here. Because there's really only 3 reasons for that. One is that's going to be the first person we take, the worst one. The second is, where is this person going to go? Because that person needs a trauma center. Maybe the tallest kid at the end of the line doesn't need that. And then how are they going to get there? Is it going to be a helicopter? Is it going to be a BLS transport? Is it going to be an ALS? Is it going to be a school bus? Is it going to be a police car? Are you just going to let the mom take them if that's what the mom wants to do? In other words, that's really what we care about. When we're talking about red, yellow, green, what we really care about is who goes first, where do they go, and how do they get there? That's all we care about.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Once they get to the hospital, we don't care about the colors anymore because they're there. They need to triage according to their 5 category or whatever they're doing and figure out who's going to CT, who's going to surgery, who can sit in the ER for a little while longer. So when we're talking about those people, if we're talking about a triage system, to just come out and say this system works the best, it's wrong, because it doesn't take into account the things that we're doing and that we see in these more violent events. The second problem is START does not work well when everybody's the same. If you had 30 patients in a business who all had chlorine poisoning, you're going to be like yellow, 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 red, yellow, yellow, green, yellow, 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 yellow. That doesn't put them in order, short to tall, does it?
No. Nope.
You've got all, like, I need to re-triage these, but I can't because the tool that I've been taught, they're all yellows. Like, what do you want me to do? Well, you need to make it up. You need to think a little better, you know? Well, what can we do to say, I have all these yellows. I need to get some yellows out of here. Like, in our perfect world, we want the same amount on green, yellow, and red. So how do I get some yellows red, and how do I get some green, you know? And, I mean, you might use things like, well, in a chlorine deal, I'm going to do it on if they have respiratory, like, fluids, because we know about hydrochloric acid like that. So, you know what? If you got a soggy breath, you're automatically a red. Where yours is kind of dry, I'm going to just leave you on the yellow right now, and I'll check later. You might say, you know what? Old people and young people don't do well with this. If you're under this age or over this age, congratulations, you're going to the red tarp. And then maybe it's something like, you know, on certain things like carbon monoxide, you actually go, well, let's do a little survey and see what your carboxyhemoglobin is. And see, and anybody, well, it's looking like we're getting pretty much everybody's under 4. So anybody over 4 is a red now.
Yeah. And
anybody with a 0, I don't care if you can't breathe and everything and you have 100% oxygen, you're going to the green tarp. So we need to re-triage. And if we say that you have to follow this, we're not letting you we're not letting you think. We're not letting you use your clinical experience.
Adapt to the adapt to the environment,
Right. And I mean, firefighters, you know, there was the guy Dave Dodson had come out with this reading smoke thing. And what's this reading smoke? Well, he figured out that, you know, based on experience of firefighters, the color of the smoke gave you some hints where the fire was and what was burning.
What it was doing,
and what it was going to do. And the more they tested it, they said, you know what, this is pretty good. And really it came down to experience. The experience was what did that, made it work. So now if I'm looking at these chlorinated patients and I'm like, I don't like soggy lungs. I just don't feel that's good. I want you to go there because I don't like you there. You should be allowed to go, I don't care what it says. You are not a green, my friend. You are a yellow. And you should be allowed to do that because you just feel that's it. So they actually did some surveys on this. And they found, you know, do you use salt? Do you use, which we'll talk about in a minute, salt? Or did you use START? Or did you just use your gut reaction? When they had experienced providers, gut reaction was way better.
100%.
And way faster. They're like, nope, red, yellow. I got to check a couple things. Yeah, I'm going to leave you yellow right now.
For now,
You can go a lot faster that way, too. And that's pretty much what I think's happening in the hospital anyways when you got an experienced provider, right? Mm-hmm. It's a lot of gut, a lot of check, like, let me check this real quick. No, I think you're okay for a couple minutes yet. I'll come back to you.
Eyeballs, pulse, maybe listen to lungs. Okay, you're going to go here.
Right.
Oh, eyeballs, you just need to go to the CAT scan. You need to go to surgery.
Yeah.
I don't need to see
I've been down this road.
Yeah, because too many people get hung up on all the parameters of it, right? So, like, I'm not saying START was good at its time, to your point, but it needs to adapt. That rollover bus crash that's very static, those are not the type of events we're dealing with today. So they need to adapt their system to that. And I agree 100% with your experience part, because this is something we do. This is a, I'm trying to think of his name. I can't think of it. Like low frequency, high risk event, so that we typically do not train on enough. And then we have the conversation off cameras. So we teach CE all the time. And then how well is that retained about, well, I taught this class a year ago, and now it happens before you get the next class, and it's been 11 months and not 12 months. Are you going to remember all these sort of things? And I think people get hung up on the other part of START is they start to, if you looked at the chart, it's like, okay, you're breathing over 36 times a minute, or if not, okay, you're this color. Like those, in my opinion, would be the bottlenecks to it. If someone was a rule follower, back to your point about, well, it says this, I have to do this. It's too restrictive, right? It's like our protocols that we build. You have to have latitude in them. It is a guideline, right? That's why we go from, there's a difference between policies and procedures and SOGs for a reason. They're a guideline. They give you latitude to make decisions based on these things. And unfortunately, a lot of people's county policies and even departmental policies are outdated, and they do name, like, use this system, and you have to use it. But it's not adaptive to these environments that are changing faster than we can change our systems and adapt and train on and be better prepared for them. So I think that's a huge point that you made. And I think the main hang up on it is there's too much information on the paper sometimes. Is respirations this? Are they breathing over this part? No, you could look at somebody and be like, you're breathing too fast and you're hurt. Next thing. And the other thing that it didn't take into account, back to your penetrating trauma and walking wounded thing, is we could take it back to even some of the trauma criteria. We talk about distracting injuries, right? So, okay, I just got hurt, right? Or how many times you see it in a movie where they're like, yeah, we kicked ass, this was great, this and that. And like, oh, you're shot. Yeah. And it's like, oh, okay, I should go to the hospital. Back to your walking wounded part. Right. Their adrenaline kicks in, they're on this high, they don't feel it. Their arm could be broken, they could be injured. So we have to take a little bit of a deeper dive and look at them, but still do it in a fast manner.
Yeah. And then SALT is the other one. And SALT has kind of come out as a little bit better for violent events. And the reason why is because one of the first things you do is interventions, life-saving interventions. Right. LSIs is what they call it. And that's what we're teaching when we're talking about Rescue Task Force and TECC. So, we really didn't want to come out and say we endorse SALT, and I actually did have one county go, well, we'll just change to SALT. I go, no, stop.
that wasn't my message. Yeah.
What we'd like you to do is say this is START and this is SALT, and experience also plays. And we don't want to say, if you say that I have to follow START, and technically the respirations were this number, they were 40, they were over 36, well, the patient's red. I know, but what if she was hyperventilating? Like the experience should say, but if it's written saying you will follow it, you're like, I got to make you a red.
I burned an ambulance for a red patient who
wasn't red.
Red, right. Needed a paper bag.
Right.
Yeah, so the message is allow for...
Yes. Learn the systems and figure out what works for best for you.
Yeah.
The best experience example I have is from my own. As a paramedic, I took in, a woman in her 30s, and I tried everything. I couldn't get her to breathe right. I tried everything. And by the time I got to the hospital, I'm bagging her, and I just walked into the ER with her, and I looked at the doc and the nurses, and I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with her. Like, I tried everything. And they're like, it's a PE. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then the second one I went on, halfway through the call, I'm like, this is a PE. I've seen this before.
Yep.
I can learn. Yeah. And then the third one wasn't even my patient. I was just a bystander. And I grabbed the guys and I go, it's a PE. It's a PE. Get her to the hospital. When they got her to the hospital, she was in arrest and she was young. And they called me. They're like, how did you know? You're so smart. I go, no. It took me 3 times. It took me a while, but the third time I saw it, I was like, that is a PE. And I will never forget what it looked like to me. Can I describe it? No.
You summed it up well. Is the take-home message is allow for variance. Right?
And I suggest everybody just look at these. It's like Ray said, it's a low frequency. It's not going to happen very often. You may never have a mass casualty, but you need to know this. you need to know how to kind of come up with that if you get thrown into that.
Or, I mean, we're kind of focusing on the dynamic event, or you still have to know it because you may have that static event,
Right.
Yes.
and
Both
maybe those will overlay perfectly in that scenario. So it's
both of them have foundations.
Have a range. Have
a range. Both have foundations. Know where they're applicable. And then if we haven't got into it yet, I wanted to talk about equipment a little bit, unless this is not fitting, since we're talking about doing treatment, doing cares, you're triaging. Yeah, in the bus, as the firefighter goes through it. And I don't remember when that video was made. Probably late 80s.
Yeah, I think it was the 80s. Yep.
Late 80s. If somebody was bleeding, he would just be like, okay, you're red, here's your ribbon, and go to the next person, where it's like, now we're teaching, no, put a tourniquet on, put a chest seal on, dart them, do these life-saving interventions.
Plug the holes.
Yeah, plug the holes, because that's what's going to make that patient live. That's what is going to make the difference, is if you get up to them, you're bleeding, and I put a tourniquet on, yeah, they're still screaming, but you're not bleeding anymore. Okay, now I can go to the next patient. But
that prevents the red to black death
yes, and that's
on the red tarp. Right?
And that's what we want to do. That's the shift. And then my only piggyback on that would be is we talk about what system you're using in your county, what your SOGs are, and those types of things. But what type of equipment do you have? Back to these throw bags and stuff. And it's not even standardized in a lot of counties that, each ambulance, let's say, has 4 of these kits, or ballistic vest, helmets, stuff like that. We start getting into RTF. And I brought this up at our level where I work in our county, and I'm like, we all need to have an understanding of what each other's capabilities are. What do you have? Each one of our ambulances have the vests and helmets and eye protection in a triage kit. And then on top of that, we also have, 4 tourniquets, 6 needle decompression needles, 6 chest seals, all these types of things. So when you're getting these vehicles in, because as they're coming in, you're going to need those resources. You're going to burn them.
You can have a quick mental count of what you have on your scene, right?
Yeah.
If you have a set minimum standard, like every ambulance in the county comes with this, or your region, whatever your whatever space you're talking about, you as the incident commander can just go, I've got 12 by, what are we counting? Tourniquets, right? There's 4 on each, and you just, do the math. Okay, I've got this many tourniquets available to me at this point, right? Or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we brought up in some of the discussions in our county, was because we had ambulances that didn't have them a year ago. Right. That they didn't have a commercial tourniquet, and I know that sounds like a really stupid
thing to say, right?
But that's the truth. Like, there was no standardization, and these things do not cost you a lot of money. Let's say even if you had the 3 bread and butter things. Tourniquets, needle decompression needle, chest seal. Hemostatic gauze is great. It's very expensive, but it's good. Those types of things. And then, okay, I need to be able to treat this many patients. So I know when those ambulances show up, I can treat this many patients. And then we even brought up another concept of having either a command car, a battalion chief's car, or some type of utility vehicle with
a bucket.
Big bag of extra. This is extra, right?
Bucket of stuff.
Because, to Donnie's point of the static event, okay, let's put it in a mall, because we have a very large mall near our area. That's a pretty big footprint. You might run out of your 4 things that you send into you go into the mall and I'm out, right? We teach that in TECC. Where is your resupply from? Where are you getting that from?
Plop the patient down. I need 2 tourniquets. I need another.
Drop 2 big ass bags with 50 tourniquets in it, this, and this is for everybody to use, whether it's your layperson, whether it's an EMS provider, a police officer. And even in one of the con eds, something that Donnie said brought me back to it, and I thought of it because we taught this, was remember when we taught the con ed, and it was the police officer that went to a disturbance, and then there was a shooting, and she did not have her tourniquet on her, which was I want to say live video from, it was out west somewhere. Yep. And it was not on the person, right? So back to Donnie's point, is building that relationship with your police department. Yeah, I have all this stuff. I have a tourniquet. I have all the chest seals. Where's it at? What's in my car? Right? So where's your car?
What's the probability you get shot in your car?
Correct. Yeah. So a lot of them are not
carrying.
Trunk. Yeah, at the trunk, in the car that's locked.
With the key in the trunk. Yeah.
So I know those all sound like probably very petty or stupid
silly things.
But that's a hell of a roadblock when I need it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That's just my opinion on certain ones.
The drills will show you things on equipment, too. So here's something I learned that I had no idea of. Never even gave it a thought before when we're talking about equipment, is I go to this drill. They're doing an active shooter at a school when school was out, and they actually had paid actors being the victims. And so it was pretty realistic. And so They bring the patients. They got them kind of congregated on the first floor inside the school building. They send an approaching ambulance up with a cot to take one of the patients at the doorway. I think they were doing it in inclement weather, and their plan was we really don't want the patients to get cold outside, so we're going to just move them right from the building to an ambulance. So they were basically doing their triage inside the building. So I'm outside, and the two wheel their cot up, and they have ballistics on, which is great. They get up there, they lower the cot, and then all of a sudden 4 people bring out a patient on a mega mover, and they go ahead and put it on the cot, and it leaves. Second ambulance comes up, does pretty much the same thing. We're doing it. And then when they get to 6, they're like, we need our mega mover back. So now they're trying to dump this patient off of the mega mover onto the cot without flopping the victim. And I'm like, why doesn't every cot have a mega mover on an MCI like this? When you go, you should have your ballistics, but there should be one in there so that when they throw it, they're like, here you go. Here's your replacement for the next victim.
Yeah.
And it was something I had never thought of. And I know it's not in any books, but that's really a smart move when you're talking about, equipment.
Yes. Yeah, that, and then I also looked at it. I believe it's called a foxtrot litter, which was based out of. It was on I want to say it was a gentleman that was on the Weekly Scrap. He talked about they redid Pulse nightclub shooting and how can they move these people fast, and it's all timed events, and all they do is set up cameras and they put a bunch of firemen at it and they say go have it, and then all we're going to do is watch and time it and then get your feedback, and then they keep changing it based on their feedback and their gut decisions and their experiences. And they talked about ways to move people and some of the differences in some of the mega movers where they have a foot pouch in the bottom. So let's say if we get there and we can't carry them, so we get to the patient, Scott and I can't pick him up, I could slide him in here, but we could drag him. We could move him, and it's okay, maybe it costs 5 cents more to buy that mega mover instead of the other one, and how have you incorporated it in that? So it's interesting to look at a lot of the movement based on what works best. But I remember that I want to say it was a foxtrot litter, TACMed litter that came up, not crazy expensive. But even the mega movers are great. That's actually what we have on our ambulance. We have so many on each ambulance that have the little foot pouch in it, so that if we cannot carry them, we could at least drag them. We could move them. But resupply is always going to be a challenge in these events. But I think you have to know the baseline to it.
And they're probably better for stairs, too, with the foot pouch.
Mm-hmm. I got to look that guy's name up. Do you know the scrap I'm talking about that was on with Corley Moore? Yeah. So he was actually from L.A. He was from L.A., and to your point, he said when they respond to an active shooter event, I don't know if it was specifically L.A. County, but when they respond to an active shooter event, they make them wear their Wildland gear. So I could tell. So unfortunately, we put all this stuff on to Caleb's point, and what do we look like? We look like police, unless you have a red vest, and then you're a big target for somebody that could still be, if you're in the warm zone, and they could still get to you. Any zone could potentially become hot. He said we put them all in they never enter a zone that would become hot in theory, or they never put them in the line of danger, and they all wear their Wildland gear. So I can look up and they're in a distinct yellow, and I know exactly who it is. I know they're my people. And then it loses weight. Yeah, they lose all the weight and things from that. About transferring command?
Yeah, well, at what point does it happen? If they go in and eliminate the threat, do we know the threat's eliminated? Does then the fire department take over, or is it still an LEO thing?
I think it's still unified. We've always
it should always be unified.
So we do unified, and back to Donnie's point, we actually talked to our police department because the likelihood of it being let's say our police chief, our assistant police chief, or either one of our detectives standing there with the fire incident commander to have unified command with the police department are probably slim to none, because if we look at our target, our school is pretty much in our back parking lot. So if anything happens, where am I going to lose those 4 day turn people to? They're going to go in the building. So you're more likely to be with one of our sergeants or one of our police officers that were out is probably who you're going to be with. But we've had that discussion of they know, okay, there's 4 of them in there, and as the next one goes up, be like, you have to stop with me. You're going to stay with me or whoever else is the fire incident commander. To try to keep it within the same jurisdiction. If not, then your next would be the next police agency, OSP, the sheriff's office, Like,
That's a huge point too that maybe we should talk about is like Chardon school shooting. You had LEO from God knows where show up. Some of them were coming as far as 30, 40 miles, 50 miles away, not in uniform, in uniform, SWAT guys. I mean, something like that goes down. How do you unify that? How do you get everybody on the same radio channel, TAC channel? Like, how do you do that? So it's chaos.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
no, I don't think you can control it.
Well, that's the problem with, I mean, I have it in South Portage County where the fire department's on local VHF. Sheriff's office is on Marks.
Yep.
And then, so local fire on local VHF can't talk to Marks unless it's through Unified Command. I mean, Sheriff's office and state police probably can easily talk to one another, but when you...
Ish.
And then...
You could patch, and that's
Ish.
not a good option, because then that puts all of that
Everything.
traffic on one channel, and you'll never understand or hear anything. So, like, what we decided with our organization was police is going to stay on their channel. That's why you have Unified Command. We stay on our channel. Even though we have interoperability with Marks and OSP, and we could talk to anybody,
Yeah.
and so can they, you have to separate that out, because especially if you merge it, it's going to be a nightmare. You'll never be able to talk. You'll have... It was like you didn't have Unified Command and you had no communications. I mean, that just... No.
But maybe Unified Command is you have OSP, you have sheriffs, you have local police chief, and you've got those representatives. Even more to the fact you got mutual aid coming in, unless you guys are going to switch to a local TAC channel or mutual aid channel. If you already have that set up, maybe you're going to have Munson's on one, Holland's on another,
It will.
Kent's on their own channel.
Back to Donnie's point, too, in communication, it doesn't matter if you're on VHF or Marks or any of that. What is your jurisdiction like? So if you go into a big, let's put this into a mall or a larger complex, is your Marks radio going to work in that building? Have
Your
you
Marks
tested
radios-
it? Do they have Marks repeaters, or are you going to have to flip to a simplex channel on that Marks radio for comms? But I think back to your point about, like, one's on VHF, one's on that, then have a VHF radio. Like, if you have a battalion chief, if you have chiefs or you have officers, have one of those radios readily available for your incident command staff. Like, a VHF radio is not that expensive. That's a pretty cheap endeavor. Like, not to be, if you have those barriers, there's some workarounds for it, to your
There
point.
is. So local fire department they have one Marks radio that they can then hop on Marks,
Okay.
but that's going to be locally, and then locally they use VHF. But to your point, like even in my hospital, Marks radio works up until 50 feet inside the building, and after that, Marks radio doesn't work.
It's a paperweight.
The Marks radio that does work is the desk Marks radio that goes
External
into-
antenna.
Yeah,
External antenna.
Exactly.
So those are just some of the things you got to know, too, for, like, your risk targets. Like Don said, is, you should be doing some type of assessment.
Pre-planned. Yeah.
Pre-planning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm a hospital that doesn't have a Marks repeater. I'm going to assume most of your buildings, your schools, like if you have a large high school, they're not going to have a Marks repeater on top. They have no reason to have a Marks repeater inside that building, so they're just not going to. So you might lose.
Building codes require it.
So you can. So to Caleb's point, there is Ohio Fire Code that could lead you to building code to have an installation of a radio system in buildings. That's a newer concept and a newer push, but
BDA.
BDA.
big money.
NDCL.
Yeah, big money.
Leaky-
Quarter
leaky-
million, $500,000 per building.
Yeah, huge money. We have it in 4 of our structures that are all new. So all the old ones, you don't have it. So all your schools are out.
Yep.